Hey YouTubers, this is France Tapon with the wanderlearn.com show, and I am going to be reviewing two products that are Bitcoin related. They are hardware wallets. One of them is a very popular, the leading edge wallet out there. The most popular one out there, I would say, is the Ledger wallet. This is the Nano S. They have a new Nano X, which is a little bit fancier, but the same basic form factor, etc., except that they have Bluetooth. And then we have a mysterious one inside here. This is going to be a face-off between the incumbent and the challenger. Who is this challenger? It is called Coinkite Coldcard. Now, if you can say that 10 times, I'll send you this for free. Just kidding. Yeah, Coinkite Coldcard is relatively new, only a few years old versus Ledger, which is a little bit older and a little bit more established, but pretty innovative, I would say. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an unboxing of the Coldcard, which comes in this commercial envelope. Comes from Canada. I'm sitting here in California, so you should get something that looks like this. If it doesn't look like this, maybe it's a fake. Just kidding. This is the Coldcard MK3, which is in July of 2020, the latest version of the Coinkite model. All right, I finally opened it up. And here we go. What do we have? Ta-da! They have two versions of their tamper-evident bags. This is version 1. And you know it's version 1 because it has the red top here. Version 2 will have a blue top. But effectively, you have to be very careful when you first receive this to make sure that it looks more or less like this. And here you have a serial number, that like a barcode, that corresponds to your Coldcard only. So you have to verify that that serial number matches everything inside the package, because if it doesn't, some funny business could be going on. Cut it open. There we go. And there it is. The Coldcard. How geeky does this thing look? Totally geeky, doesn't it? It looks like a calculator. And in some ways that's good, because if you're by customs officials, let's say in some like the Democratic Republic of Congo or in Vietnam, they may not even know what this is. In fact, even in the United States or Switzerland, they may not have any idea what this is. And that's probably a good thing. They might think, oh, it's just a geeky looking calculator. So that's kind of cool. Same thing that the Ledger has, just looks like a USB stick, although kind of a fancy one. I was kind of concerned at first because when I cut this, there was no void sign symbol. And according to their website, if there's no void when you open it up, then that's suspicious and you should report that. And then I realized that when you start to peel off this label here, the red, then like this, then all of a sudden you'll start seeing the void symbol appear. So now I understand why they have a version 2 of this, because the version 1, if you just sliced it like I did with a scissors, the void thing doesn't show up. It only shows up when you actually peel it off that way. So minor detail, I can see why they improved that design. Now, one of the cool features is that you can use any USB. And in fact, you could use, let's say, a AA battery that connects to a USB, or just a power bank like I'm doing here, and just plug it in directly into the Coldcard. How cool is that? So that way you don't have it connected at all to a PC. So there I go, I plug it in, and you're gonna get some little indicators here. They also throw in the wallet backup card here. This is where you're gonna write your seed phrase. And they give you this, looks like a sticker of some sort. Okay, and so now we're gonna compare this guy with this guy. Now, one of the things off the bat, the Ledger requires you to plug it directly into a computer for it to work. So they give you a USB cable that goes into your computer, and then you can run what's called their Ledger Live system. So that's basically how the Ledger works. Coldcard also can work in the same way. You can plug in to their mini USB directly in your computer. But if you do that, you're kind of defeating some of the innovation that they have supplied. They have made it possible that you can have what's called an air gap between you and the computer, because a computer obviously could have run code. And although it's unlikely, and although it's quite difficult, it is theoretically possible that they can go through the cable from the computer into your very simple computer that you have in your Ledger and do some nefarious things. If you don't have that cable, then it becomes a little bit more difficult, actually a lot more difficult. So then, well, how did they do it? Do they do it through Bluetooth? No. They do it through a micro SD card. That little slot there is the micro SD card, and that allows you to transfer information from the Coldcard to your PC or Mac or Linux or whatever you're running. So you're going to have to buy a micro SD card, and there you have a symbol that says genuine, however you like to pronounce that. That green light, if it's the red light there, it's going to say caution with a red light. So that shows that maybe something's wrong. Now, they have used gobs of epoxy on the inside to make sure that if somebody wants to remove any of those chips or goof around with any of the wires inside, you should be able to see evidence of that, because it's impossible to remove the epoxy without causing obvious damage to the circuit board. So take a good look at it, inspect it, and it's transparent. It's not just to be geeks, but actually it has a practical purpose. Oh, this is very cool. So after I accepted their terms and agreement, they tell me, look at that number and then compare it with the number here, and they should match, and indeed they do. So that's just another security measure to make sure that somebody didn't replace this thing with a different bag or vice versa. No monkey business. These Coldcard guys, Coinkite, have thought about absolutely everything, every little thing. I think that they were hackers in a former life, and they became like, they went from black hat to white hats, because they know all the little tricks that hackers like to do in order to break into a system. And they have blocked every single path of entry. Okay, let's compare the Ledger with the Coldcard. Now, one thing I love about the Coldcard is that it has this really nice screen that is clearly legible. And you compare that to this guy's screen. I mean, look how much they can write on there. It's pretty clear. And you compare that, it says Bitcoin or whatever. It's just like not as nice. This has a big fat numeric keypad, which is pretty nice, and the screen is better. I love their double pin system. And what is a double pin? Well, with the Ledger, you're going to have one pin associated with your master account. You could create a second pin if you have what's called a passphrase, but effectively you have just one pin. This has kind of two pins. The first one is your normal pin, and then they're going to show you what's called an anti-phishing word. Let's say that word is called building. And if that word doesn't appear, then that means something might have gone wrong. And then that tells you that somebody might have screwed around with your Coldcard. So it's a way that before you enter in the second half of your PIN, you know that somebody has already screwed around with it. So the process is you enter your first PIN. It can be as little as 2 digits, or it could be as many as, I think, 8. They recommend 4. And that the second half of your PIN should also be about 4, but it can be as little as 2, as much as 8 again. The nice thing is that those anti-phishing words pop up and help you catch. Now, you can also automatically have what's called a duress pin. Duress is that somebody comes up there with a $5 wrench, or comes up with a gun and says to you, hey, hand over, give me your PIN, give me your ID so I can access all your Bitcoin here. With the duress PIN, you can give them and it gives another account. Now you should put some Bitcoin into that account. It shouldn't be empty, but something that satisfies somebody and that has what's called plausible deniability. Now you can do the same thing with the passphrase on the Ledger, but it's nice that it's kind of made very easy on the Coldcard. Another advantage of the Coldcard that I like is that they have a brick PIN. What's a brick PIN? Well, with the Ledger, you have to enter the wrong PIN 3 times and then it will brick the device. So it closes out, but not completely, because it's effectively doing a factory reset. You cannot do a factory reset on the Coldcard, which can be a downside. If somehow you really screw things up and you want to do a factory reset, you cannot. Once you've entered in the wrong PIN, I think 13 or 12 or 13 times, it completely destroys and makes the thing just a thing that you need to recycle at that point. It has utterly no value. You have bricked the device. It has committed suicide, harakiri. But with the Ledger, it doesn't have that kind of brick thing. Why would you want the brick PIN code? Well, again, if somebody's coming there with a gun and tells you, give me your PIN, you could say, okay, I'll do it. And then you put in your little code and then all of a sudden, poof, it's completely useless. Now, at that point, of course, they could kill you and get just pissed off at you, and that could be the downside of using that strategy. Unlike other hardware wallets, is that it effectively has a flash ROM, read-only memory. So that's different. It only has a pathetic amount of 10K of storage, nothing. So you can't really power it up or do anything useful. You can't really do anything like software-wise super useful or put in too much programming in it because it's read-only memory. In other words, you can't write on this. That is something that's different than other hardware wallets. You can also do 12-word backups, encrypted backups. So you can put the SD card in, and by the way, I recommend getting a simple SD card that is reliable, but small memory. In this case, it's only 4 gigabytes. Don't get a 32 or 64 or 128 gigabyte card. It's overkill. You just need a small, cheap, but not too cheap, decent quality. I got this on Amazon. And you can use that in conjunction with this, because the more space you have on your SD card, the more chances that if somebody magically got your Coldcard and your SD card, that theoretically, if it's a very sophisticated person, he could put a lot of programming stuff and a lot of code inside of a high capacity SD card. The other cool thing about the Coldcard is that it can display. That display there has QR codes. So if you want to have somebody send money and they need to read it, or you want to read it with your phone, you can read the QR code with the Coldcard, which is pretty cool. And perhaps its biggest claim to fame is it can do PSBT. And PSBT is partially signed Bitcoin transactions. Whew, what's that? Well, it's basically what it says. With the Ledger and most hardware wallets, you have to, you fully sign it. You connect this to a computer and you sign it, it's done and finished. With the Coldcard, you can do that, but you can also do what's partially. So you start to sign it on your computer, then you take the SD card, you put it into your Coldcard, and then you finish signing it. You give it its final authorization on the Coldcard using your key phrase, your key, and then take it out the SD card and put it back into your computer, and then say, here you go. Here's a fully signed transaction. It's ready to go. Either send or receive or whatever you're trying to do. The Coldcard doesn't come with its own software like the Ledger. The Ledger has what's called Ledger Live, and it's a nice graphic interface on your PC, a software program that allows you to see how many Bitcoins are currently attached to this seed phrase or to this key. The Coldcard doesn't have that. Instead, it works with other wallets out there, like the Electrum wallet, or my favorite is the Wasabi wallet. Why is the Wasabi wallet cool? Because it can do what's called coin join. Coin join allows you to anonymize some of your coins and your transactions so that you have additional privacy. So let me try to sum this up for you and keep it real simple. Who should buy the Coldcard? I think you should buy the Coldcard if you want the most secure wallet out there. This is it. Nothing beats it. You should also buy the Coldcard if you want to store a large amount of Bitcoin. By the way, it can only store Bitcoin. It cannot do Ethereum. It cannot do EOS or any of the other cryptocurrencies out there, alternative coins. If you need that, then you need to go to the Nano S or the Nano X. But if you only are interested in Bitcoin, Coldcard is better for you, especially if you have a significant amount. What's a significant amount? Well, that's up to you. To me, it starts to make sense once you have 1 Bitcoin or more. So what's the bottom line? Who should buy the Ledger? It sounds like so far that I'm just going for Coldcard. Well, there are some people who would prefer to have the Ledger. One is if you manage some other cryptocurrencies, that would be one reason. 2, you don't have much Bitcoin. 3, let's say you have, if you have less than 1 Bitcoin, you could just keep everything on the Ledger. But once you go over 1 Bitcoin, I think it starts making sense to have the Coldcard as your go-to device. But it only also makes sense if you're willing to put up with the pain in the butt features, which is having to go from your micro SD to your computer. It's almost double the work because you have to go back and forth. You're basically doing what's called sneaker net. You're going across these things, and that can be tedious if you're going to be doing a lot of transactions. But if you're kind of what's called a hodler, somebody who keeps their Bitcoin and doesn't move it around that much, then it's worth it for the added security. And by the way, if all hell breaks loose, you can plug in directly through the USB. If you really like the Ledger Live interface over, let's say, the Wasabi wallet, you can do that. And by the way, the Wasabi wallet and the Electrum wallet, those are what are called skeleton wallets that you can create using the Coldcard. So they're fully compatible. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And you can use the Wasabi wallet or the Electrum wallet to see what you have exactly, all your transactions that you have associated with the key that is managed by this device. If you're afraid to royally screw things up, if you're the type of person who clumsily does these kind of things, the Coldcard might be a little bit dangerous just because you can more easily brick this device, and it's a little bit more easy to then have some sort of technical problems that will brick the device. So versus with the Ledger, you can do a factory reset, which is kind of nice for those people who are kind of clumsy. I forgot to mention a kind of a cool feature, which I don't think I would actually use, but I think maybe some people might, is what's called a login countdown. And what that is that when you put in your PIN and all of a sudden have access to the device, it gives you a countdown that you set beforehand. It could be minutes or it could be up to 28 days before you can actually do anything. And you're like, wow, why would I ever want to do that? Because again, if you're the person who's often in situations you're really worried about somebody getting a hold of this and trying to steal your Bitcoin, well, let's say if you put in a thing that makes it wait a week, during that week, they've got to hold you hostage. They have to kidnap you for an entire week for you to finally be able to start using this. Of course, the downside is that if you really need to move your Bitcoins in and out in less than a week and you're in a hurry, well, there's no way around it. You're stuck. So when you set that login countdown, it's stuck at that thing. Eventually, once you log in, you can then turn off that parameter. But anyway, something to think about it. And those people who don't trust the randomly generated seed phrase that comes out of this, you can also use 6-sided dice and generate your own random seed phrase. You can't do that with the Ledger. So what is the bottom line verdict? My verdict is to go with the Coldcard. The Coldcard wins this battle. The challenger has beaten the incumbent. The only cases where that's not true is if you're really planning to hold lots of different cryptocurrencies, but beyond, if you're going to plan to have other cryptocurrencies and you're on a budget and you don't really want to have two devices, then you should go with the Ledger. Or if you're technically incompetent and you have challenges like that, but you can do quite a bit with just the Coldcard as is out of the box. You could use it just in the same way that you use the Ledger. In other words, you could plug it directly into a PC, so you don't have to use the sneaker net, and you don't have to play these games with the micro SD card and moving it back and forth between the PC and the Coldcard. If you don't get tired of playing that game, and I can understand somebody who does a lot of transactions, that would become tedious after a while, you don't have to. You could just plug it into your PC and take the same risk that everybody else takes when they use their Ledger, which is a minor risk. I mean, let's put this all into perspective, folks. While I really admire and love all the security features that Coinkite has made in their Coldcard MK3, the much more likely event of you losing your Bitcoin is not some sort of hack, some sort of person going into the hardware and pulling out the epoxy and doing all these other things to get to your, or tunneling through your computer through the USB cord cable and all that stuff. Those are all low probability events. The high probability event is that you, my friend, will forget your passphrase. It's that you will forget your PIN or your 24-word seed phrase. I mean, that is the much, much more likely scenario of how you're going to lose your Bitcoin. And it's not going to be through some sort of hacker who's going to get through it. So, but still, it's a risk. And so I think that just for a few more bucks, you can get something that's a little bit more bulletproof than the Ledger. And it has a nicer screen, nicer interface. I think for that reason, it's worth it. But don't let the security that the Coldcard gives you let your guard down with regard to storing your 24 seed phrase and your passphrase. That ultimately is the most important safeguard you can have to keep you and your Bitcoins safe. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn and subscribe to this channel and share it with people.